I am sure if you are asked about serial killers, you will, without any hesitation, name the male killers. No one expects a female to kill, not to speak of multiple murders, right? The thing is, females are viewed as compassionate, caring, and loving people, and even the thought of killing another person is totally out of their alley, right? But make no mistake, when a woman becomes heartless, they become twice ruthless. Imagining a young, scorned woman taking revenge on men as it's is put, or a woman killing her partner for life insurance is believable. But for an old woman, killing people is unheard of. This is a grandma you don't want to leave your child with, because the possibility of you finding them alive is impossible. And also, it's life threatening. And that brings us to our today's true crime of Dorothea Puente. Before we go ahead, make sure you join the community by clicking that subscribe button and like this video, and I would also like to know what you think of this case. This week we will be focusing on the female serial killers, or let me just say the deadliest females out there. And I'm going to focus on the serial killers all around the world. As I always say, be very afraid of the living, as they are extremely dangerous. Dorothea Puente has been a topic of discussion for a lot of years. And this is just not going to be new thing to people, or maybe new thing to some people, because she has been a topic because of the magnitude of her crimes and the fact that her age terrorizes people. Because who can believe that a woman of her age, in her 50s, is capable of such crimes? Women don't usually pick strangers as her victims, rather they go for those close to her, those whom she cares about and take care of, and their mode of killing is usually poisoning, not ruthless gunshot strangulation and all that. Even the most conniving serial killers grow old. So don't let these little old men or little old women fool you into thinking they're all sweet. For instance, take Dorothea Helen Puente, an American for convicted serial killer. In the 1980s, she ran a boarding house in Sacramento, California, and murdered various elderly and mentally disabled boarders and buried them in her backyard before cashing their social security checks. Puente appeared to be a caring old woman running a boarding house in Sacramento, but in actuality, she was running a deadly operation. The serial killer, dubbed the Death House Landlady, is suspected to have murdered at least 9 people, most of them her own tenants. The shocking part is that she targeted her fellow elderly people. When the Sacramento Police Department received a missing persons report from a concerned social worker, they sent Detective John Cabrera to the boarding house where the individual was last seen. The elderly landlady, Dorothea Pointed, seemed to be very friendly and cooperative, but when Cabrera discovered human remains in the backyard, Pointer falls under suspicion of murder. Then, with police getting closer to unearthing the rest of the bodies, the old lady gives Cabrera the slip and goes on a run. Like, listen, she said, Mike, I'm going to get some coffee with my nephew. So the detective gave her a chance, and she went. She went on a run. Detective John Cabrera must place together the clues of Dorothea Puente's dark past to form a picture of the grandmotherly serial killer. Meanwhile, Puente is hiding out in Los Angeles motel and lining up her next victim, an elderly man she meets in a bar. But when the man recognizes Puente's face on the news, he contacts the police and Puente is caught. Back in Sacramento, prosecutors embark on the case against Puente, and after a long, difficult trial, the judge sentenced Dorothea Puente to life in prison.
Where did we meet?
I used to be very active in the Mexican Chamber of Commerce. And we met one time when Aquino Jordan was in California.
Did you ever work with St. Paul's? I worked there. I did a series on elderly care.
I used to be a very good person at one time.
I thought I met you at the volunteer.
You might have. I was active in that a few years back.
No. So mad, huh?
All right, guys, come on.
Briggs is right over
Let's
this
give him
way.
room, huh? Let's get him out of here.
Mr. Montalvo, what can you tell us about the murders? Were you involved in any way?
Excuse me.
Max, take him right over there.
I'm with you.
You know why you've been arrested, ma'am?
Right.
Right now into the phone call. Dorothea!
You're gonna go with us?
Dorothea, did you have anything to do with that?
Johnny?
Can you talk to us about what happened in
I
your
got it.
house?
So-
Where's Bert Montoya?
Dr. Jorgen, can you interview for
So let's get into Dorothea's Puente's victims. So we have Ruth Monroy. While Puente was not convicted of Ruth Monroy's death, the 61-year-old woman is believed to be Puente's first victim. She was Puente's business partner who died in 1982. Less than 3 weeks after she moved in with Puente, a coroner determined she died of drug overdose, but will not conclude whether it was suicide or homicide. Very shortly after Monroy's suspicious death, Puente was arrested for all the things, right? Drugging elderly people and stealing their benefit checks. Monroy was not considered to be one of her victims, but Puente spent like 3 years behind bars. The next one is Everson Gilmouth, who was 77 years is also another suspected victim of Puente. She was his pen pal during her 3-year stint in prison. He lived in Oregon but moved to California to marry Puente when she was released in 1985. However, they never got married and he was soon found dead. His body was discovered in a makeshift coffin close to the Sacramento River in New Year's Day of 1986. Mama is busy. Another one is Dorothy Miller, who was 64 years old woman who was last seen alive in October of 1987. She was a tenant at Puente's when she vanished. Miller was an army veteran and Puente used Miller's veteran identification card to get medical treatment. Puente was convicted of first-degree murder for Miller. And then we have Benjamin Fink. Benjamin Fink was 55 years, vanished in April of 1988 while living at Puente. He was last seen after Puente told another tenant that she was going to take care of Ben upstairs and make him feel better. He was described as alcoholic. Puente was convicted of first-degree murder for Fink's death. Then we have Leona Carpenter, who was 78 years old, was described as a sick widow who technically died from a drug overdose while living at Puente. However, witnesses say that she was so sick to a point she couldn't walk across the room to get the medication that she overdosed on. Puente was convicted of second-degree murder for Miller's death. Then we have Betty Palmer, who was 78 years old tenant who lived at the boarding house. She was found buried in a backyard, mutilated. She was found with no head, hands, and feet. Man, Puente is a cruel woman. Like this. Then we have James Gallop. His body was identified by the metal sutures that had been left in his skull following his brain surgery. James was 62 years old, at a tenant at Puente. Before living at her boarding home, he had survived both a heart attack and a brain tumor surgery. She denied knowing him, like literally, she denied knowing him. Then we have Vera Faye Martin, who was 64 years old, also a resident at Puente's house. Investigators believed she may have been buried alive because the patterns in the dirt around her body indicated that she may have been attempting to claw her way out of the shallow grave in the backyard. Her wristwatch was still ticking when she was discovered. This just breaks my heart. To what point does someone reach to bury a fellow human being alive? To what point? It's devastating. Another one is Bart Montoya. Now this is the one this is the person who outed her, and it made people to now start thinking, if Bart didn't step on her doorstep, I'm sure she would have gone on with her killing career. Bart Montoya was a man with intellectual disabilities. A social worker placed him at Puente's boarding house. She would come by Puente's home to check on Montoya's. In 1988, Bart disappeared, and when the social worker would ask where he was, Dorothea gave excuses. Since the social worker knew that Bart didn't have relatives and was intellectually disabled, she didn't believe Dorothea. She was given a ton of excuses, yeah? And she claimed he went to Mexico, which the social worker didn't believe because Montoya seemed to really have no one. For him to be wandering around and just sleeping in any place that he could get, like anywhere he could place his head, it meant that he did not have relatives around, or really no one cared for, and that was the perfect victim for Dorothea. Later, when the police dug up the boarding house yard, they found Montoya's body. Now, Puente is a fighting woman, okay? She did not go into custody quietly. The morning after the bodies were discovered, she left the house. She was going to meet a nephew for coffee. Instead, she made a break for it. Let me tell you. I don't know. Jesus, what's okay? I'm sorry. I wasn't supposed to laugh. I'm sorry. So she was arrested in Los Angeles after her date, who they say was almost being a victim, recognized her. Now, Dorothea did not make it to trial until October of 1992. In large part because it had moved to Monterey County due to excessive media coverage of her arrest. Like, this is an old woman. Who is going to think or going to believe? It's like a circus. Everyone wants to see this old woman who is a serial killer. No one believed it. Even if someone told me that she was my neighbor, someone told me, I'd definitely not believe, because come on, even when you listen to her talk, she's a soft-spoken woman, gentle. You cannot believe that she did that, right? After a year-long trial, Puente was convicted of first-degree murder in the deaths of a tenant, Dorothea Miller and Benjamin Fink, and second-degree murder in the case of Leon. However, she was never convicted of the other 6 murders, including the murder of James Gallup. Puente ultimately sentenced to life consecutive without parole. She died in a Central California women's facility in Madera County, California, in the year 2011 at the age of 82. She maintained her innocence until her death. And that, my friends, is the story of Dorothea Puente. Be careful outside there.